Disclaimer: the following program is designed to offend, provoke, and challenge your religious sensibilities. It contains content that will likely offend anyone who holds religion sacred. This is for those with thick skin or a taste for the harsh truth. If you're easily offended or cherish your religious views, please turn off now. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. You have been warned. Welcome back to Matthew 14, Part 2, where the Gospels stop pretending to make sense and just start throwing poop at the wall to see what sticks. Last time, Matthew couldn't remember what Herod's job was, who he was married to, or the fact that he murdered John the Baptist, until he saw some guy doing tricks and lost his mind like a paranoid drunk at a seance. Now, in Part 2, Jesus doesn't bother showing up for John's funeral. He throws a mass feeding stunt in the desert and then abandons his disciples in the middle of a storm. Not metaphorically, he literally tells them to get in a boat and then walks off. I'm hoping to shove the rest of Matthew 14 into Part 2. We'll see if I make it. Check out the playlist for Matthew, Genesis, and Revelations. Lots of goodies in there. If you missed Part 1, go check it out. But if you don't hit like, comment, and subscribe, I'm just going to assume you're Team Herod and move on. Let's get right into it. So here's the setup. Jesus just found out John the Baptist was murdered, tried to get away for some alone time, and instead got mobbed by thousands of people. Instead of sending them away, he felt compassion and started healing them, which brings us here. Evening hits, the disciples finally speak up, this place is desolate, and the hour has now passed. Send the people to the villages to buy food. This sounds practical, but already the story starts to crack. Desolate place, this is the second time Matthew calls it that, 14:13, 14:15. The Greek word moa keeps repeating like a chorus. Not just a remote setting, it's a symbolic wilderness, a miracle launch pad, so to speak. The hour hath now passed isn't just, it's getting late. The Greek ora aperketai means the time to keep following Jesus without food has run out. It's not sunset, it's a breaking point. And the solution? Let the people go to the villages to get food. Which, what? This immediately contradicts the desolate place framing. Either they're in the middle of nowhere or they're near functioning towns. You can't have both. Small Galilean hamlets didn't have stockpiles for 5,000 people at night. This isn't a market. It's a Matthew staged miracle moment. But Jesus is like, wow, chill. They don't need to go. You feed them. And in Greek, it's emphatic. Dot a tois umeis phagein. You yourselves give them something to eat. He's not just assigning them a task. He's calling them out. And here's where Matthew sanitizes the scene. In Mark 6:37, the disciples snap back. Should we go buy 200 denarii worth of bread? Sarcastic jab showing their disbelief in bad planning. Matthew cuts that line completely. No cost estimate, no resistance, just straight to, we have 5 loaves and 2 fish. No mention of where they got them, no boy with barley loaves like in John 6. No Philip, no Andrew, just generic disciples, stripped of identity, handing over a miracle setup. And here's what Matthew hides that John reveals. This whole exchange was a test. John 6:6 says Jesus already knew what he would do. He was testing them. Matthew erases the test, the names, the roles, all to keep the spotlight clean for Jesus to act. Jesus says, bring them to me. 5 loaves, 2 fish, and a crowd the size of a small Roman city. What could go wrong? First, he commands the crowd to recline on the grass. No chairs, no preparation, just mass obedience in the wilderness. But unlike Mark, who says they were arranged in groups of 50s and hundreds, Mark 6:40, and Luke, who confirms the 50s, Matthew skips the crowd control. No structure, no ranks, just sit and wait for the magic. And this is where the story gets messy, because the Gospels can't even agree on the setup. In John 6, a boy brings the food. He's got 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. Andrew points it out, they admit it's not enough, and Jesus uses it as a setup. But none of that exists in Matthew. No boy, no names, no sourcing. The food just shows up. And that's the issue. Either Matthew cut the human element to make the miracle look cleaner, or John added it to make the story more grounded. One version has a test, the other skips it. One gives you dialogue and doubt, the other gives you loaves from nowhere. So either someone's lying, or both are. And if John invented the boy, then he's just dressing the miracle up with props. If Matthew erased him, then he's scrubbing the scene to keep Jesus spotless. Either way, it's narrative manipulation from someone. They all ate and were filled. No dialogue, no astonishment, no one asking, where is this food coming from? Mark includes crowd amazement. John includes skepticism. Matthew, just narration, no human response. Then we get the famous finale, 12 baskets of leftovers, which is already silly. They started with 5 loaves and now have more food after feeding thousands. And these aren't just any baskets. Matthew uses dikaniskus, meaning small baskets, while Mark uses kophinoe, larger ones. The image shrinks depending on which gospel you're reading. Why 12? You already know. 12 tribes of Israel. This is just theology disguised as a miracle story. The point isn't that Jesus is good at feeding people. The point is that he's reenacting covenant history. And the head count? About 5,000 men apart from women and children. So the real number? Probably 15,000 to 20,000. But Matthew casually underreports it, either to make the miracle more manageable or to preserve the symbolic 5,000 men formula. And still, no one says anything. No praise, no confusion, no human reaction at all in Matthew, just silence and chewing. Right after the feeding frenzy, Jesus immediately sends his disciples into a boat. That word euthios, immediately, it's already the second time in 10 verses Matthew's hit the gas pedal. It shows up again in 1427 and again in 1431. But pay attention, Jesus constrained them. That Greek verb, enatkasen, doesn't mean he suggested or encouraged. It means he forced them. This isn't a friendly shove. It's Jesus kicking his own disciples into a storm with zero explanation. Then he lets the crowd go, which is hilarious because you'd think dismissing over 5,000 people would take more than a verse. But Matthew waves it off like Jesus snapped his fingers and everyone just wandered off quietly with their miracle leftovers. No crowd control, no goodbye, just poof, and they're gone. After that, he went up on the mountain alone to pray. So cue the Moses callback. This is Sinai imagery. Jesus ascending a mountain, leaving the people behind and communing solo with God. Matthew's reaching for Old Testament gravitas without bothering to say it out loud. If this were a Hollywood script, it'd be a silhouette shot with wind blowing his robe like a Superman cape. And now the disciples. The boat was in the midst of the sea, distressed by the waves, for the wind was contrary. That's Matthew's version of a crisis. You wouldn't know it, but this scene is supposed to be a full-blown storm meltdown. In Mark 6, we're told Jesus saw them from land, struggling at the oars for hours, stuck in the middle of the sea, around 3 to 6 a.m., before he decides to casually stroll out on the water. And just when you think it couldn't get more ridiculous, Mark 6:48 says he wished to pass by them. Not rescue, not reassurance. It's just walk right past like he's out for a supernatural jog. Your disciples are screaming in a storm, and your plan is to ignore them? What kind of savior is that? And what was Jesus doing all that time? According to Matthew, he was up on a mountain praying alone for hours. That's all we get. Vague solo prayer while his followers suffer. And here's the thing. Matthew never says Jesus saw them struggling. In Mark, Jesus watches from land. In Matthew, nothing. Just mountain prayer. And then out of nowhere, he shows up walking on water like it was scheduled. No reaction, no awareness, just timing with no context. And Matthew says this happened after evening came, but Jesus doesn't show up until the fourth watch of the night. That's somewhere between 3 and 6 a.m. So he left them in a storm for what, 8 hours? Just to finish his mountain retreat? That's not compassion. That's performance. Matthew skips the tensions and goes straight to the spook show. The rowing's gone. The exhaustion's gone. Even the location was gone. This could be anywhere. The disciples scream when they see Jesus walking on the water, thinking he's a ghost. The Greek word is phantasma, not a vision, not a hallucination, a literal sea spirit. This was ancient horror logic. If you die at sea, the sea keeps you. Then Jesus speaks for the first time all night. He says, "Be of good courage. I am he. Be not afraid." That middle line, ego eimi, doesn't mean, hey, it's me. It's Exodus 3:14, code, I am who I am. This is Jesus name-dropping God's personal identity mid-storm. Same phrase he uses in John 8:58. Before Abraham was, I am. So yeah, this isn't comfort. It's a God flex, or if you will, a God reveal with sea spray. Think Prometheus, but wetter. And Matthew keeps that part. He trims every human detail but leaves the God flex intact. Why? Because this isn't about comfort. It's about revelation. The point isn't that Jesus saves them, it's that he is something bigger. And if you're wondering what the other gospels do with this, Mark includes the rowing, the struggle, and the ghost panic, but ends with confusion, not worship. John skips the fear and the ghost. Jesus walks up, hops in the boat, and they're instantly at shore. No storm story, just instant teleportation. Luke doesn't even bother. Entire scene deleted. And don't expect storm calming either, at least not yet. That comes later after Peter wipes out. In Mark 4 and Luke 8, Jesus stops the storm with a command. Then Matthew, He lets it rage because the drama's not done. Peter still has to sink. This isn't rescue, it's narrative setup, faith test theater in progress. Let's rewind a second. Before Peter ever opens his mouth, we're already in stupid territory. They've been traveling with Jesus for months, day and night, face to face, and yet, when they see him walking on water, their first reaction isn't recognition, it's panic. They scream, "It's a ghost!" Not, "It's the Lord," not, "Is that Jesus?" Just straight to apparition. And why? Jesus hasn't died yet. There's no reason to think he's a ghost. They didn't bury him. They didn't lose him. He literally just fed 5,000 people hours earlier. So unless he suddenly looked like a completely different person, there's no logical reason they shouldn't recognize him, unless he didn't look like Jesus, which the text never addresses. The whole setup only works if you don't ask basic questions like, why did 12 grown men forget what their teacher looks like? Then Peter speaks. And shocker, it's not faith, it's a test. If it is you, that's not trust, that's suspicion. The Greek structure sets it up like a dare. If that's really you, then prove it, let me come out there too. This is the same Peter who later pulls the same stunt in John 21:7. He never trusts Jesus by default, he always needs a sign. Always. And Jesus just says, come, which is less encouragement and more, all right, let's see what happens. So Peter climbs out of the boat, and for a few steps it works. He's doing the impossible. He's walking on storm-thrashed water like it's pavement. Then he notices the wind. Not the water, not the walking. The wind. The Greek makes it clear it's not a breeze, it's violent gusts, probably driving huge waves, megadiskuma. And somehow that's what snaps Peter out of it. He's already defying physics, but the weather freaks him out. It's like calmly skydiving and then panicking because you saw a bird. And Jesus, he waits. Doesn't calm the storm, doesn't step in, just lets Peter sink. Peter screams, "Lord, save me," and then finally, Jesus moves. He reaches out, euthos, Matthew's favorite word, immediately, which means he could have helped earlier. He didn't. This was staged. And then comes the rebuke, oligopist, little faith, not gentle advice, not sympathy. It's a jab. The word itself is a masculine noun morphed into an adjective. Basically, you tiny truster. Jesus uses 6 times in Matthew, and it's never a compliment. Peter isn't praised for stepping out of the boat. He's mocked for sinking. I guess walking on water for a few seconds doesn't cut it. And don't forget, Mark doesn't include this scene. John doesn't include the scene. Luke skips the storm entirely. Only Matthew gives us this little drama, because Matthew wants a sermon. This isn't eyewitness memory. This is faith test theater. The whole thing exists to humiliate Peter and showcase how calm and in control Jesus supposedly is. As soon as Jesus steps into the boat, no words, no gestures. The wind lulled. That's it. No command, no peace be still. The moment he enters, creation recognizes its maker and taps out. Matthew skips the storm calming dialogue entirely because he's already done that miracle back in chapter 8. No need to repeat the beat, just upgrade it. Now, Jesus doesn't stop the storm, he just blatantly outranks it. And then comes the big payoff. Those in the boat bowed to him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." So there's the dogmatic spotlight. This is the first time anyone in Matthew calls Jesus the Son of God out loud. The demons have said it, sure, Satan hinted it, but this is the first human confession, and it comes mid-lake, post-panic, no build-up. What Matthew edited out to manufacture this climax is clear. In Mark 6:51 through 52, there's no worship, no title drop, just this. And he went up unto them to the boat, and the wind lulled, and greatly out of measure were they amazed in themselves, and were wondering, for they understood not concerning the loaves, for their heart hath been hard. So in Mark, they're still confused, still amazed, still spiritually clueless. They just saw a man walk on water and stop a storm. And the conclusion? They didn't get it. Their hearts were hard. They failed the test. Matthew cuts the confusion entirely and replaces it with full-blown reverent worship. No amazement, no wondering, just immediate recognition, and the first time anyone in this gospel calls Jesus truly the Son of God. It's not an emotional reaction. It's a scripted declaration. And that last line from Mark, "Their heart hath been hard," that's no throwaway. That's an Exodus reference. Hardened hearts are Pharaoh territory. That line is lifted straight from the Moses playbook. Mark says the disciples still don't get who Jesus is. Matthew rewrites the moment to say they finally do. We even still have back in Mark 6, verse 48, where Jesus intended to just pass them by on the lake. Not join them, not rescue them, just stroll on past. Matthew omits this bizarre detail, erasing the ambiguity and turning the scene into a clean emotional resolution. John 6:21 skips the worship, skips the title drop, skips the storm resolution altogether. Jesus shows up. They let him in the boat and instantly reach the shore. Matthew is trading all of this for pure cinematic climax. And again, Luke skips all of this entirely. He goes from the feed to the next day's healing tour. And the confession itself, truly you are the Son of God. That jumps ahead of Peter's own moment in Matthew 16, verse 16, where he finally says, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. So wait, are the disciples already convinced, or does Peter need a private redo later? Matthew collapses the timeline to drop a title now, even though Peter's solo confession later is supposed to be the big moment. And the Greek here isn't subtle either. Prosekeneson, they didn't just nod politely. This is the same word used for worshiping kings and gods. This is prostration, not, wow, nice job out there. Matthew's Jesus doesn't just calm storms anymore, he collects worship like tribute. And just like that, scene change. They land in Gennesaret, and suddenly the storm, the walking on water, Peter's almost drowning, the Son of God worship moment, none of it matters. It's gone. The second they hit land, it's back to business. Jesus is immediately recognized. Word spreads. And just like that, he's surrounded by crowds again. People begging to touch the fringe of his garment, because the hem of Jesus's clothes is now the go-to healing device. This is the same exact gimmick used in Matthew 9 with the bleeding woman. That moment had personal drama, risk, and context. This, just crowds swarming like some kind of divine merchandise table. And the disciples vanish. Not a word, not a reaction, no follow-up to the worship scene at all. The chapter ends. Storm over, worship declared, him touching resumes. And as always, the Gospels can't even agree on where they landed. Matthew and Mark say Gennesaret. Mark also says they were headed to Bethsaida. John says they were going to Capernaum. 3 towns, 1 boat, 0 consistency. Because why have a coherent story when you can just pick a different location in each gospel and hope nobody's paying attention? But don't worry, apologists have a solution. They blame it on the mystical, magical Q document, a hypothetical saying source that nobody's ever seen, touched, quoted, or found. No manuscript, no papyrus, no scribbled note in a cave, nothing. It's a ghost document, invoked like a band-aid whenever the Gospels refuse to sync up. Because when the stories contradict each other, the answer isn't to admit someone lied or forgot or just flat out added narrative spice. It's to invent a missing scroll and pretend that explains everything. Q is the band-aid of apologetics. Slap it on any contradiction and pray the audience doesn't ask for evidence. So if you're still holding your little Bible like it's a unified account of literal history, maybe ask yourself, why does truth need a ghost document no one's ever seen just to hold the story together? Anyway, if you enjoyed this, like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.